One of the latest voices to weigh in on the Colin Kaepernick protest is Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney. He did not hold back in his disdain for the recent protests.
I think everybody has a right to express themselves, you know, in that regard. But I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team. I don't think it's good to use the team as the platform. I totally disagree with that. You know, nobody's really asked me about Kaepernick or whatever, but you know, I totally disagree with that. You know, not his protest, but I just think there's a right way to do things, and I don't think two wrongs make a right. Never have, never will. And I think that it just creates more divisiveness, more division.
Booger McFarland, kind enough to join us. Thank you so much. I know you're being pulled in a lot of different directions here today. You had really strong comments on Dabo Swinney on your Booger and Burns podcast. Can you please share those with the audience, your reaction when you heard Swinney?
Well, you know, when I heard him talk and I heard him continue to, you know, elaborate more on what you just heard, he talked about not only about the divisiveness, but he also talked about some of the accomplishments and some of the accolades that the African-American male has accomplished. In the same breath, he talked about people who don't like this country can leave this country. And the only thing that came to my mind was the translation. Hold up, wait a minute. So you're telling me that the people who are complaining about injustice, which are the African-American males, that's what Colin Kaepernick is protesting about, justice for people of color, justice for the African-American male. We don't think this country is perfect, and we need a change. So the people that are complaining about change, the black people, we can leave. And then you list the accolades as if just because we've had a two-term president, just because we have a owner in the NBA who's black, just because we've been allowed to quarterback at Alabama and Georgia, everything is okay. That the black man has now arrived in America, everything is okay. That's the way I interpret it, and it really kind of set me back because my mother was born in 1955. She shared with me some of the experiences when she grew up, how she was treated. The black man hasn't always been treated right in this country. I think we all agree. Now, are things that way today? Things are so much better today. But to say we've arrived, and just because we can quarterback at Alabama, just because an NBA owner such as Michael Jordan owns a team, just because we've been allowed to do more things in this country, doesn't make the equal rights that we've been striving for there. And I just I was just taken back by his comments, and it really bothered me. So people want to talk around the subject. They don't want to talk about the subject. And the subject is, when are we going to do something about the inequality? When are we going to do something about the justice? And that's what Colin Kaepernick is striving for. Do something. Let's not just keep talking. Let's do something about it.
And the scary part, according to some people, don't think there is any inequality at this point.
Correct.
Stephen A., let's get your thoughts here.
Well, I'm a fan of Dabo Swinney, and I like him a great deal. And that made me very disappointed in what he had to say, because I thought that it reeked of insensitivity. You know, he basically said that we should be grateful for what we have, as opposed to acknowledging that as a nation of people, as an African-American community, we've been treated as second-class citizens for a vast majority of American history. And even though we're on a come-up compared to what things were like pre-civil rights movement, of course, the bottom line is that there are still challenges that we have to deal with every single day, and it's consistently an uphill climb. And for somebody in his position, coaching a slew of African-American players, to not be sensitive to that plight, particularly when he's in South Carolina. You're down south, so you're fully aware of what life is like and has been like throughout history down there. For those words to come out of his mouth, I would really love to have a conversation with Dabo Swinney about that, because, again, I genuinely like the man, and I've got a lot of respect for him, and I just felt that it was highly insensitive, ill-informed, and you know, just dismissive, if I could use a stronger word. The other thing that resonated with me was when he basically talked about, you know, leave this country. Again, I took it as him saying, this is the greatest country in the world. You want to find out how bad it can be, go someplace else and see what it's like compared to what it is here. So I'm trying to give him a pass there. But the flip side to it is that he has to understand that that's arguably the most dismissive thing that he said, and it was highly offensive to anybody black to hear those words coming out of his mouth. But I want to emphasize that whether it's him or a Trent Dilfer, both positions I disagreed with. There were some points that they made that I could respect and attach validity to. And even though I may disagree with it, it's no reason to excoriate and character assassinate them. You should just correct them and say, look, this is how it affected us. Trent Dilfer and Dabo Swinney are in an entirely different category, just in terms of their words on this subject, than is the case with Boomer Esiason, John Tortorella, the Team USA hockey coach, and of course, Mr. Tony La Russa, the manager, former manager with the Oakland A's, St. Louis Cardinals, and now an executive with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Molly, can y'all do me a favor, please? Play for our audience what Tony La Russa had to say so I can highlight the difference between him and Dabo Swinney. Play that for me, please.
I would not allow it on my team because I think respect for this country, the flag, I know what the Constitution says, but I also know you have some rights as an organization. And I really distrust Kaepernick's sincerity. I was there in the Bay Area when he first was a star, a real star. I never once saw him do anything but promote himself. And all of a sudden now he's a second stringer and he's got this mission and I just don't trust his sincerity. And even if he was sincere, there's ways to express your belief in, you know, some of the issues that face blacks around this country without disrespecting the country you live in or the flag that it represents. Absolutely would not allow it.
What everybody needs to understand is that Tony La Russa, John Tortorella said they wouldn't allow it, and Boomer Esiason said he would have cut him. They're saying that despite the fact that you are breaking no laws, whether it's federal laws, laws that govern our society, or even the laws of the league that you play in, since the NFL may encourage you to stand up, but it doesn't mandate that you do so. What they are saying is despite the fact that you are breaking no laws, despite the fact that you are simply doing a quiet, peaceful protest, they are appalled because they disagree with you, and as a result, they would exact ramifications against you. That's entirely different than Dabo Swinney and Trent Dilfer. They just disagree. In the case of La Russa, Tortorella, and Esiason, they are saying they would exact consequences against you for exercising your rights as an American citizen, your rights as a human being, particularly when you are attached to a community that has clearly been disenfranchised. I think that's the most egregious part of all of this. I think it's insane that they've gotten away with saying it, and somebody needs to call them on the carpet, or especially in the case of Tony La Russa and John Tortorella. I don't think John Tortorella should even be allowed to coach Team USA until he retracts those damn statements. I think it's that much of a travesty that he's gotten away with it. Go ahead, Max.
A lot to get into here. Let me try to get to it quickly. First, Tony La Russa. I'll call him on the carpet right now, Stephen A. Tony La Russa is very patriotic unless the President of the United States extends an invitation to the White House because his team won the World Series. He did not show up when President Obama invited him to the White House. Then I guess he wasn't as patriotic as he is some other times. It's his interpretation of how you show patriotism that's important, I suppose. It's an outrageous comment Tony La Russa made, who's had a lot of success as a major league manager. I mean, in Oakland, where everyone swelled up twice their normal size and started hitting home runs. And then in St. Louis, where the exact same thing happened. He had a lot of success as a manager. You can't take that away from him. But these kind of comments are outrageous from Tony La Russa, particularly based on his past behavior. I want to get into Dabo Swinney because he and La Russa totally missed the point about Kaepernick. Kaepernick is being asked to actively participate in something. He's not protesting by forming a picket line around something. He's being asked to participate in something that his conscience will not allow him to participate in. That's completely different. You're the one imposing something on him, not the other way around. So this idea that he's choosing the wrong forum, or now's not the time or the place, or there's a right way or a wrong way, doesn't hold water. Dabo Swinney. I was not as offended as many about what he had to say. Now, listen, he's not the smartest guy in the room. He's not the dumbest either. He was basically trying to make a Martin Luther King point where he says there are some who, this is what I took, focus on the good stuff. Let's focus on all the progress we made. Okay, Dabo, but there are those who say, well, no, let's focus on how far there still is to go. And he doesn't seem to want to focus as much on that. He wants to focus on how great we are because of how much progress we made. I like to focus on that too. But you can also acknowledge that people have a legitimate point where they say we're not there yet, as I bring up all the time. Differences in per capita education and income, and unless you're of a school of thought that somehow some people are intrinsically inferior to others, then there are reasons for those differences. And of course, we know what this country's original sin is. We know how it's been over the last several hundred years in terms of the oppression of people of color, specifically African Americans in this country, and clearly that has not been redressed. And finally, I like what Dabo Swinney said about when he talked Jesus. And he said, love thy neighbor. And if everyone would just pay attention to that, everything would be okay. And it reminded me of something Chris Rock said, who I love to quote because he has a quote for everything, really, that's right on the money. Chris Rock said, you know, people talking about how much progress black people have made, how much progress. Black people haven't made the progress. White people have made the progress because they started acting right, or at least more of them started acting right than they used to. Love thy neighbor. Yes, Dabo, that's what these protests are about, Coach. These protests are about, for way too long, white people didn't follow that rule, and that's why we find ourselves in the predicament we're in. This stuff ain't rocket science, folks.
It's not, and you're absolutely right, Max. And Booger, I'll close by saying this. Dabo coaches in a sport that epitomizes the problem that exists in the United States of America. How many Division 1A programs are there? How many black coaches are there? The paucity of African Americans heading football programs, the paucity of African Americans in athletic director positions, the paucity of African Americans in positions to be presidents and chancellors, etc. We're talking about more than 100. I mean, just as recently as a couple of years ago, or even a year ago, Booker, correct me if I'm wrong, there were less than 10 black folks made up less than like 8% of the population in terms of head coaches in Division 1A football. Matter of fact, I think if I don't have the numbers in front of me, I forgot it. I had them last year, but I think the number was around 3% for crying out loud. It was an absolute travesty. So the things that Dabo Swinney are alluding to, this progress that he's talking about, well, where is it in the very profession that he's in? I don't see it. Do you?
No, Stephen, to your point, I think the biggest thing that we learn from this situation is to make sure that we talk about what we're an expert on. Dabo is talking around the subject, and he, like most people, are trying to straddle the fence. They're trying to be politically correct. They're trying to make sure both sides are happy. Just be an expert on who you are, Dabo. You're never going to be a guy who, like me, grew up in the South, or someone like my mother who was raised and born in 1955, who grew up in the South and had to deal with some of the things that black people had to deal with. Be an expert on yourself. And if you really want to find out the progress that black people have made, or the perceived progress, then just ask one of us. Ask someone and take a look, because I think the problem is, even though we've come so far and everyone wants to relate and say, man, things are so much different, I think when you really drill down underneath the surface, a lot of black people think things are still the same. They're just hidden.
And clearly still a very long way to go.
Yes.
There's 13 black head coaches in Division 1A, so clearly a small minority.
Out of 120, 28 schools, I think.
Yeah, and the one owner that he referred to in the comments, one NBA owner, no black NFL owners. Booger, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, your take, and your honesty. So come join us again soon.